Deborah yesterday and asked her, will you finish your part and leave it hanging? And I did that on purpose because I really wanted to see you sitting on the edge of your seat thinking, what comes next? And by golly, I see a little bit of, I wonder what is going to come next. Interesting story about Simeon. I've always liked it. And Deborah left us with Simeon holding the babe. And he said, and then Deborah gave it to me. What he said has two names. The name can be, John is probably familiar with it, the Demetus, or it is the Psalm of Simeon. So picture Simeon holding the Christ child and saying these words, Lord, now you are letting your servant himself depart in peace according to your word. For my eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared before the face of all peoples, a light to bring revelation to the Gentiles, and the glory of your people, Israel. And Joseph and his mother marveled at those things which were spoken of him. And then Simeon blessed them and said to Mary, his mother, Behold, this child is destined for the fall and rising of many in Israel, and for a sign which will be spoken against. Yes, a sword will pierce through your own soul also, that the thoughts of many hearts may be revealed. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Over the past 5-10 years, there's come a new word. George has got me into new words this week. He's found a new app with all of these highfalutin, really cool words, and I like that, George. But the word I'm talking about this morning, I think most of us are familiar with, is analytics, particularly if you're involved, Wesley and George, with sports, because it has become a huge part of sports, but it's also a part of business all over the place. And analytics is basically built on statistics, which computers can easily give us with very little time and very little work. And folks, every one of us here this morning is part of a statistical field. I don't like thinking that I'm one of many, but I fall in, and you fall in, to a whole field of statistics. And the statistics are kind of interesting, if not a little bit disturbing. For instance, statistics tell us that the average American in our lifetime is going to spend 5 years just standing in line waiting for someone. We're going to spend 8 months opening junk mail at the kitchen table. We're going to spend 2 years or maybe even more answering phone calls and answering emails. And we're going to spend 6 months just waiting at traffic lights. And Lord help anybody who picks up the telephone and calls somebody, and the conversation begins with the other person saying, please hold for a moment. We'll be right with you. They haven't figured out yet how long we're going to wait over the course of a lifetime. But you know, if you called AT&T or Walgreens or somebody of that nature, you better have your lunch with you. Anyway, some of us today may have come to church in a holding state of mind. Perhaps you went to the doctor last week and you're waiting for what? A test result. And test results always come after the weekend. You've got to wait those days for a test result. Or maybe somebody has been to a job interview and you're waiting for a phone call for that. Or you might be waiting for your kids or your grandkids to come and see you. Or you might be waiting for them to go back home. There's always that possibility. Well, to wait or not to wait is not the question for us this morning. The question is, how are we going to wait? What purpose, what meaning what we find in these in-between times. And I'll talk about in-between times again in a minute. Anyway, there's this very minor character that we've stumbled upon this morning in the scriptures. His name is Simeon. We don't know much about Simeon. The only place that we find Simeon is where?
Deborah,
thank you. God, I love getting old. Deborah started and I ended there in Luke chapter 2. And we see quickly that Simeon was a devout man. He was a righteous man. Most people say he was a priest or a prophet, but it doesn't tell us that in the Bible. But he spent his life waiting for the term that Deborah used, the consolation of Israel. Now, when we are consoled, somebody tries to make us feel better, make it better for us. Well, that's what Simeon was waiting for. He wanted to see things get better for the nation of Israel. And he lived and he survived for so long by the constant hope and knowledge that he would not die until he saw the Messiah. And Simeon, through his long life, became just an expert at waiting. So on today, which is an in-between Sunday, and you might say in between what? It's in between Christmas and Epiphany, and then Lent and Easter. So we're in what's called ordinary time, if you will. And maybe we can find a clue how we can wait a little bit better too. And the first thing we need to know is that Simeon he waited with a purpose. The ultimate dream of his life was one day that before he died, he would see the Messiah face to face. There's an author that I use from time to time for illustrations. His name is Steve Covey, and he has a book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it's not just a religious book, although it does deal with religious very deeply. And he says the second habit that all of us should embrace is to begin anything that we do with the end in mind. Where are we going? Where are we going with that? And some of you all may use that concept in your business or in your personal life, that we begin with where are we going to end up. And Covey goes ahead and he says that everything is created twice. Once at the beginning, and then the second time is when that creation, that idea in our head comes to fruition over here. George, Wesley, they build things. They make things out of their hands. Go look in George's backyard and Wesley's too. There's stuff that they built. But before they built it, they thought about it. They had a vision of what was going to be there. And they may have put it down on paper. And then after they had this plan, they got the tools. They got the hammer, they got the nails, they got the level, they got all the stuff that they needed, and they built it. But whatever it was they built was first created in their mind, and then when they set foot out on that deck, that was the finished product. But there was all this stuff in between. A chef gets hired to do a dinner party, and he just or she doesn't run into the kitchen and throw things in the oven and start baking. They think about who's going to be there. What kind of food will they like? How long are they going to be there? Is this going to be finger food, or are we having a meal? And this plan formulates. Deborah, is that the way it works for a woman in the kitchen, a man in the kitchen? You know, you got to have this plan, and that's the beginning. And everything takes place, and then the cooking and the preparation starts, and after all of that is over, all the people are seated, and it's a wonderful time. But it was created once over here, and then once over here. And Covey, the author, relates that to our personal lives. What Wesley and George were going to do, They made a plan. Do we have a plan? Do we have a statement about where we are going? In a simple sentence, could we put down on paper, why are we here on earth? What is it we hope to accomplish in our lifetime? And then, as we go through, when we fulfill that purpose, we'll know that our reason for being right here has been fulfilled. Bill Gates, everybody knows who Bill Gates is. His mission statement was this: a computer on every desk, in every home, and in every office. Pretty good. For Simeon, his mission statement was seeing the Messiah before I die. And that was his only reason to live, to see the Messiah before I die. And I ask you, do you have a mission statement? What is your mission statement? Might be something to think about as you're driving home this afternoon. And that was Simeon's only reason to live, to see that Messiah. So what we have to do is think of what is the most important thing that we do that will leave our mark on the face of this planet where we live. What is mine? What is your reason for living? You see, when your purpose, when your goal is great, you're going to be willing to wait. But if you haven't figured out yet why you are here, you're going to get bored with the in-between times in life. If you know why you're here, if you have a purpose for living, if there's a reason that you can think of for your existence, then you're going to be willing to wait for it. And bless Simeon, he knew his purpose was to see Christ before he died. So what did Simeon do? He waited. But Simeon didn't just pat his foot impatiently. And boy, can I do that. Because for 400 years, there had been no word whatsoever from God. And Simeon had lived through the Roman invasion and the Roman occupation. He had seen the Holy of Holies destroyed. He had watched hope amongst the people sag like a wet dish rag does over the water faucet there in your kitchen sink. But through it all, he held on to a revelation that God had given him. He held on to hope. He held on to that promise, you will not die before you see the Messiah. And that reason was reason enough to be alive for Simeon. And hope does that for us. Hope does that for all of us. Hope sees what we can't see sometimes. Hope feels the intangible, what we cannot feel. Hope even achieves the impossible. People of hope have discovered there's a huge difference between waiting and marking time and just standing around with nothing to do. So that is boredom. But when we're waiting with hope, with anticipation, with excitement, that makes it worth the while. When you found out you were first pregnant, Wesley, your wife, that was an exciting time. And those 9 months in there, you didn't get bored because there was something going to happen. You knew something was going to happen. So, the difference between an excitement in waiting and just taking up space for waiting is there's something at the end we're waiting for. So Simeon waited with purpose. And you know what? It may not be a baby, but there are purposes each one of us have. I know you folks. You have things that you do. We get excited about what we're doing. Sometimes it may awe us a little bit. We may feel overwhelmed, but if we stick with it and get it done, it's okay. So, Simeon